Okay, it is my pleasure to introduce Andres Saab. He is researcher at CONICET, and his talk is titled Ways of Syntactic and Semantic Composition in the Modeling of Linguistic Emotion. The floor is yours, Andres.
Thank you. Okay, this is a recursion, but let me see if you can see. I can you see my slides now?
Yes.
Okay, I don't see you guys, so sorry if I you just interrupt me if I'm talking too fast or too bad English or whatever. Okay, thanks a lot for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. Uh, be there or here, I don't know. And I will talk about certain types of expressive construction, mainly in Spanish. Basically, I will discuss presence or absence of what is called argument extension, which is a type of apparent compositional failure in the use of some types of expressive. I will discuss this presence or absence in basically three types of expressive construction: pre and post-nominal expressive adjectives and epithets in Spanish, and then I will try to offer a way to integrate some interesting empirical findings into a general theory of the grammar of non-representational meanings, which is basically the big project here, right? So the plan is make a brief introduction to present you my research agenda on what I call non-representational grammar. Then I will discuss pre and post-nominal expressive adjectives in Spanish, and then I will discuss the case of epithets, and then I will conclude with some summary plus some extra discussion with close proposals in the literature. Okay, so let me start with the idea I have, what I call here non-representational grammar. Okay, so I will start with the idea that what people call use condition as opposed to truth condition in semantics sometimes at least must be modeled not as LF meanings but as PF meanings. I mean, like type of meaning that arise by virtue of mere phonetic forms. Okay, so okay, I will start with the basic functionalist claim that beyond its obvious representational force, human languages are also extremely powerful devices for communicating features related to the speaker and hearer profiles. This is basically the famous Euler triangle, um, which basically says that language is a device for expression, appeal, and representation, basically. And then you can add to this triangle all the extension by Jacobson and other people, okay? Now, the obvious fact is that all human languages have expressive goals. For instance, if you look at Spanish, at my Spanish, you can look at this non-exhaustive list of expressive words. For instance, you have many attitude indicators, like many words that conventionally communicate emotional attitudes regarding entities, events, or situations. Pure expressive like puta, bendita, maldita, the equivalent to damn, fucking, and blah blah blah. Puta puta madre, mierda, to modify prepositions, and so on. Then, of course, you have a set of addressive forms, which basically communicate respect to the hearer on the speaker part, like the famous distinction vos usted in many Romance and Germanic languages, but also other forms of honorification, like the Spanish don, doña, which are used to indicate closeness, respect, or something similar with respect to the argument, to the honorific. Then you have a super huge list of words that conventionally characterize the local or non-local context of the speaker. Register alternation like cerveza, beer or birra, which is being informal, trabajo, laburo, child language, perro, guau guau, slurs, sudamericano, Sudamerican, sudaca, which is the pejorative for Sudamericans, and so on and so on. So there is a set there is a big set of expressive words. Okay, you have, of course, part of the animal I will discuss today, which are epithets, in cases like that F of Andres. Okay. Now, I will frame my discussion under Kaplan's idea that you can get basically expressive meaning just making reference to not set of words but set of context. Here's a very important Kaplan passage from his paper on expressive exclamatories, where he says, now here's the new idea. We can equally useful measure of the, you can get an equally useful measure of the expressive information that is in a sentence, or in the case of exclamatories like ouch or ops, in an expressive standing alone, by looking at all the contexts at which the sentence containing the expressive or the expressive alone is expressively correct. I claim that ouch is an expressive that is used to express the fact that the action is in pain. What is the semantic information in the word ouch on this analysis? Well, the semantic information in the word ouch is, or more accurately, is represented by the set of those contexts at which the word ouch is expressively correct, since it contains non-descriptive information, namely the set of those contexts at which the action is in pain. So that set of contexts represent the semantic information containing in the word ouch. So here the idea is that you need at least a dimensional semantics for making reference to classic set of words for the case of truth conditional meaning, and you can also model expressive meaning by changing words for context and get expressive meaning by referring to those contexts. Okay, so now from a cognitive point of view, the one which I think is important for this conference is what is basically how to model context in terms of certain cognitive framework, the one arising from Chomsky and other people, right? And it's kind of difficult because, as Reinhardt has said, the hardest to define given our present state of knowledge are the context system, which precisely narrow the information transmitted through the derivation, coded in the relevant representation, and select the information that is useful for the context of use. So I will make a speculation here, and I will propose that regarding context system has kind of a flavor, a global flavor, in the sense that different from the conceptual or sensorimotor system, the context system can access basically to PF or LF interpreted structure. So I will claim basically that context system can provide, or can deduce use condition both at PF or LF system. Okay, this is basically the general idea. That there is, I mean, for me it's clear that some things that Kaplan, Potts, and other people call expressive meanings or use condition or whatever must be deduced at PF. This is clear for me. It's an idea that I'm exploring in a particular project, but the idea is very old. The idea is, as you may remember, is already in Trubetskoy Principles of Phonology, when he said that although free phonological variation does not contribute to representation, this does not imply absence of any meaning contribution. For instance, in the usual case, free variation makes a stylistic contribution. And he puts many examples from Germanic and other language. For instance, in the domain of palatals in Rio Platense, in my Rio Platense Spanish, I don't know, in Brenda's Rio Platense Spanish, free variation characterizes the social type of the speaker. So, for instance, if you say show, if you say "yo" with the voice palatal, then you can get a flavor of the social class or social origin of the speaker, right? So this type of social meaning, of course, can only arise at the PF branch of the grammar, right? This is something very classic. There are other types of phonetic or phonetic strategies to get expressive meaning. For instance, there is a very classic way to talk in Rio Platense Spanish, which is called verretalk, which basically consists in a syllabic manipulation in which you invert the syllabic structure of the word and then you get an informal flavor. For turco, you say cotur. For país, country, you say ispa. For café, coffee, you say feca. For the verb pagar, to pay, you say garpar. It's not exactly a perfect syllabic inversion. There are some restrictions. It doesn't matter. But at the end, what you get is a clear informal register as a result of this type of syllabic inversion. And syllabic inversion is something that can only happen, at least according to some architecture, at this part of the. Oh, sorry. Here, so you deduct bias or conventional implicatures, or you can model conventional implicatures in pot sense or right sense by making reference to the form, to the mere form of words, right? And with no reference to any LF or conceptual structure. Okay. Now, this is something that I think that is very clear, but there is then a less obvious point, which is basically that maybe all human languages have an expressive grammar. And now the observation is this: compared to the grammar of representation, it has been observed that expressive grammar show many perplexing properties. This is a very old observation. It's not new at all. I will call this one way to make sense of this observation. I mean, the observation is that expressive grammar is perplexing, is to assume that language is mainly a representational system. So look at this quotation from Post, in which he says, "I believe that in order to understand the emotive dimension in a linguistic perspective, one has to base oneself on language conceived as an instrument for reasoning. On this basis, affective meaning will appear to be a complication of rational language." And perhaps this connect with Martina's talk yesterday, in the sense that this is just another way of putting Martina's point, namely that the representation dimension of language is grammatically encoded as the unmarked option. Okay, so she talked a lot about ways to mark the unmarked option by modality, evidentiality, and so on. But when you look at expressive language, you see that the markedness is still more radical. That's part of the point today, okay? So I will talk today, I will not talk today about syllabic inversion, phonetics, but I will talk about two marked expressive strategies at the level of syntax, okay? First, I will talk about late merge of expressive material, which basically consists of merging items post-cyclically during a given syntactic derivation. And then I will talk about another syntactic strategy, which is basically, which I call syntactic recycling of mixed words, which basically consists of merging items in non-predicative positions. Okay. This type of grammatical mechanisms produce grammatical objects interpreted at the interface that constitute the input to the context system as defined above. In both cases, at LF or at PF, use condition are deduced, and this is the point. Just clarification, I'm not saying that in order to get expressive expressive meanings or any type of expressive meaning, you need this type of market strategies. Of course, you have a lot of activity at the left periphery, as Martina has shown. You have intonation strategies. You have like a myriad of strategies for expressive meanings. I'm just claiming that at least some form of expressivity are the byproduct of this type of syntactic manipulations. Okay. So the first case study is pre and post nominal expressive adjectives, and I added this section just because I noticed a new fact which I think is very interesting to share. I don't have a perfect answer to the fact, but the fact by itself is very interesting. So for POTS, I mean, POTS 2005 is basically an implementation of Kaplan idea that expressive meaning or conventional implicature has to be modeled as use conditions. And he made the claim that when you look at English, both expressive adjective of the damn type and epithets of the bastard type form a natural class. Basically, they denote function that take an addition denotation as argument and return the denotation of such an argument plus a conventional implicature dimension. Okay, so for him, Sheila's damn dog is on the couch or that bastard Chuck arrived late are subject to basically the same axiom of semantic composition or semantic mechanism, which is what he calls CI application, conventional implicature application. This rule basically is given by an expressive operator that takes an attitio element and return the same attitio element in the truth conditional dimension and adds a conventional implicature in another meaning dimension. He used this bullet to separate meaning dimensions. So the only difference between damn and bastard is the argument in the input. So whereas damn takes a property as argument, bastard takes an entity as an argument, but the rule is the same. It's a functional rule that delivers exactly a conventional implicature in the Gricean sense. Okay. So if you have a phrase like "damn Republicans," damn takes Republicans as an argument, returns Republican at the tissue level, and at the conventional implicature that you have some problem with the Republicans. And the same with Chuck, with the difference in the semantic type of the argument. Okay. Now let's focus on expressive adjectives and consider the following examples. So if you say the damn Republicans should be less, these are all POTS examples. If you say the damn Republicans should be less partisans, you get the idea that the operator, the expressive operator, is affecting the class of Republican. Then if you look at the second example, we have to look after Sheila's damn dog. You see that damn is not a perfect modifier of dog, but it's a modifier of the entire DP. And more extremely, if you say the damn machine didn't come with a plug, then you can see that you have a clear radical separation between syntax and semantics in the sense that the expressive is modifying the entire proposition. Okay, this is a paradigmatic illustration of the phenomenon of argument extension, the apparent mismatch between syntax and semantics, whereby some expressive seems to affect a syntactic constituent other than the one they directly modify. Okay, this is a kind of issue for POTS, but he resolved the issue saying, yes, this is a composition failure. I'm fine with this failure of composition. No problem. Other people like Gutzman have proposed a compositional way to treat this kind of cases. There are also pragmatic alternatives and are, well, a variety of proposals in the literature. Now, let's look at the Spanish. Spanish has a few expressive adjectives like puto, puta, fucking, maldito, maldita, damn, bendito, bendita, blessed. Basically with the same expressive meaning, but with a difference in the terms of intensity or informality. Okay, so fucking is, of course, puto, puta is the more extreme one, maldito is middle, and bendito is really more formal or less informal. Now, as many adjectives, expressive adjectives can occur pre and post nominally without any change in expressive meaning. This is what Gabriela Resnick says in a paper in 2013. So she put this type of examples. For instance, de nuevo trajo esa maldita moto, de nuevo trajo esa moto maldita. Once again, she brought that damn motorcycle. Once again, she brought that motorcycle down. Okay, this is literal Spanish. O, for instance, no aguanto más este puto clima, no aguanto más este clima puto. I cannot tolerate this fucking weather. I cannot tolerate this weather fucking anymore. So she claimed it's exactly the same. It's just a case of a stylistic choice. Now, here's the new observation. In reality, when you look at the argument extension cases, only prenominal expressive adjectives trigger argument extension. So for a case like the following, el perro se comió la puta torta, the dog ate the fucking cake, the only way in which you can really get the argument extension reading according to which you are really in a hate emotional state with respect to the entire situation, this can only arise if the adjective puta is prenominal. In post-nominal position, like here, this is totally unfelicitous. Okay, el perro se comió la torta puta makes no sense. Okay, so here's an interesting observation, but it shows that it's not exactly as Pot says that you can do just take an expressive adjective and get argument extension. Syntactic position matters, and it matters a lot. Okay. So here's the main conjecture. Presence absence of argument extension requires a distinction both in the way of combination between expressives and their arguments, and in the locus of expressivity in general. I contend that expressivity is an all-the-way phenomenon which can take place at different grammatical interfaces and in different computational cycles. This makes sense if we take seriously the intuition behind the very notion of use condition as opposed to truth condition. Put differently, any object made available by the computational system might have or must have in the use condition a set of associated conventions which regiment condition on appropriate use. So the idea here is that when you have something like la maldita abogada, the damn lawyer, the type of manipulation I'm thinking of is one in which in the first syntactic cycle, you have just a DP, an extension projection of a nominal with the nominal head abogada, and then you have your extended projection, and then you have your LF, and your LF is la abogada, a regular semantic for this. Prenominal adjectives occurs in another cycle, which I call a late merge cycle of expressive material, which trigger a use condition at PF. And the use condition is basically that the construction is felicitously used in a context C if and only if C pertains in the speaker of the context is in a heightened emotional state at aroma. Okay. This is a way to implement another Potts rule, which is the rule that he calls isolated conventional implicature, meaning which is a rule in Potts system which basically adds material to a branching node with a tissue element, and in which you can see that there is no functional combination between the expressive and the sister. But if you look at the type of examples he has in mind, it's very interesting that this corresponds to supplement, non-restrictive clauses, another type of appositives, many elements for which many people have claimed a light insertion type of approach. So it makes sense, I think, to think of this type of adjectives as being latent merged as other type of supplements or syntactic object and provide use condition in a later cycle of contextual interpretation. Now, for the case of the postnominal, we call it only prenominal expressive adjective trigger argument extension. So for a case like la abogada maldita, the postposition of maldita blocks argument extension totally. Now, this is straightforwardly accounted for if the postnominal expressive adjective combines with this argument in the same syntactic cycle. Okay, so in a sense, what I'm saying here is that maldita in predicative position combines functionally in the usual way, in the POTS usual way, and this is basically because late insertion or late merge can only happen at expletive position or in position which are post-cyclic, right? And postnominal position, argument position, or are position which cannot be subject to late insertion. Okay, so the interim summary is that we have a new finding. Maybe this is obscure in English because in English fucking is always prenominal, but what I'm claiming here is that if you want to get argument extension, you have really to look for different attachment position and for different cycles of syntactic or grammatical computation. So prenominal expressive adjectives like la maldita abogada may receive non-local interpretations because being late merged, they are not interpreted at the left, hence they do not partake in standard compositional processes. Wherever they contribute a kind of meaning that is unspecific, so they leave room for the audience to draw pragmatic inferences concerning the target of the speaker negative attitude. By contrast, postnominal expressive adjective, la abogada maldita, are present in the first cycle of syntactic computation, are consequently interpreted at the left through the standard compositional processes, hence they cannot receive non-local readings. Okay? So let's look at epithets. Recall that for POTS, epithets and expressive adjectives form a natural class. Now the observation is this. When you look at argument extension, it seems that only expressive adjectives trigger expressive argument extension effects. So when you look at epithets, they behave well in terms of composition. So you say that bastard cresc, bastard can only modify its argument, the proper name in this case. So this has been observed by Guzman, where he says that it's very interesting that expressive adjectives show this split between where they are realized and where they are interpreted. This is especially surprising given the fact that expressive epithets like bastard in that bastard crest have semantically been analyzed in the same way as expressive adjective. Recall, he's mentioning here implicitly POT's approach. So if POT is right, why is the case that only expressive adjectives trigger argument extension? And he says, or he wondered, what is special about adjectives and their place inside the DP that they behave in this way, whereas nominal elements do not seem to behave in a similar way. So it seems that Guzman is making a difference in grammatical category, right? He's not saying this, he's just wondering this. But now we can say, okay, look, the difference cannot be in grammatical category since postnominal expressive adjective in Spanish do not trigger argument extension either. So the special guys here are prenominal expressive adjectives, which are the only ones that trigger argument extension, right? Okay. So let me show you that even when the epithet does not trigger argument extension, the epithets are still expressive elements. Okay, and probably they are expressive elements in both sense. So the second way to get this type of expressive meaning is just by manipulating an item in positions, or put differently, just merging elements which otherwise are predicative in positions which are not predicative. So what I call syntactic recycling thesis is basically the operation that consists of merging material in expletive positions. Okay. This is the case of epithets. So when you look at epithets and you compare epithets with pejoratives, like this is the pejorative. Sorry for the bad words. Okay, I'm just mentioning. So when you use a slur in predicative position, you get what is called a mixed semantics. And the mixed semantics is basically reduced basically to the fact that the word in this position contributes to truth condition and use condition. So Andres is P means that Andres is homosexual, and also means that Andres is in the stereotype of homosexual, or whatever you want, or whatever you model your expressive meaning here. There are many proposals. Now, when you use the same word, exactly the same word, in epithet position, like in the construction El puto de Andrés, the epithet of Andrés, which is a typical qualitative binomial construction in Romance, then you have this fascinating fact. The truth conditional dimension disappears, basically vanishes, and only the stereotype of the expressive meaning remains. Okay? Look, take this example. Andrés is un animal. It has two readings. Either Andrés is a living being, like let's say a human being, or reading two, Andrés is the stereotype of an animal because he has some properties which are normative incorrect, right? Now, when you use the same word animal in epithet position, like that animal Andrés, el animal de Andrés, the classificatory force disappears. You cannot interpret this as Andrés is a living being. And you are forced to interpret this construction like Andrés is the stereotype of an animal. Okay. So again, this basically gives you the flavor, the idea I want to push here, which is basically that there is a way to get non-representational meaning just by externally merging stuff in positions which are non-representational, which are non-predicative, or which are non-truth conditional. So for the case at hand, you basically have a regular nominal syntax for slurs, like el puto here. And then you have a non-representational syntax for epithets, which basically consists in merging the slur in a non-predicative position, so canceling the truth conditional dimension and preserving only the communication of the stereotype of the expressive meaning. Okay. There is also another crucial difference, which is basically I'm analyzing epithets as being pronominals. So this is an index, and this index is basically subject to a function, assignment function. Okay. There are many reasons to make this difference between slurs and epithets in terms of structural ambiguity, right? For instance, if these structures are right, then you predict that this guy, the first one, behaves as an R expression, so subject to principle C of binding theory, but this one is not subject to principle C of binding theory because basically it's a pronoun, not an R expression, and there are evidence that it is the case. So for instance, There are a lot of confusion in the literature about epithets because in normal context, epithets behave or look, it seems that they behave as R expressions. But when you look to the facts closely, you see that what is going on with epithets are they are antilogophoric, right? So if you say Andrés dijo que el puto llegó tarde, you get a principle C violation, okay? But you can also obtain a violation of the anti-logophoricity constraint that you have below, which basically says that an epithet must not be anteceded by an individual from whose perspective the attributive content of the epithet is evaluated. If you change the perspective there, then you can see that the epithet is felicitude, but the slur is not. So if you say, Andrés es tan extrovertido que todos piensan que el puto se va a meter en problemas con la policía, Andrés is so outgoing that everyone thinks that the epithet, okay, is going to get in trouble with the police. Perfectly fine, only on the epithetic reading, but if you want to interpret this word as having classificatory force, the sentence is out, okay? The change, this is also a principle C context. The change I made here is only related to I only change the perspective, okay? That's the point. I maintain C command structure, C command environment is the same that the first sentence, but the perspective change. When the perspective change, the epithet is okay, but the slur is still out because of principle C, okay? But there are many other differences. For instance, only epithets allow some degree modification or intensification. You can say el muy puto llegó tarde, the very epithet arrived late. This cannot be interpreted as an slur. Obviously, it's only an expressive. Only epithets can occur in qualitative binomial construction, like the one we saw before. You can say, el puto de Andrés llegó tarde. That F Andrés arrived late. Okay, this is only interpreted as an epithet, not as an expression. Third, this is a very important property. Slurs can be elided. Epithets cannot be elided. So you can say something like el puto de al lado y el de arriba, the slur next door, and the one living upstairs. That's perfect, and that's because basically an slur heads its projection is the head of the DP, so you can elide it. But as we saw before, epithets are not the head of the MP, so they cannot be elided. So we cannot say something like el puto de Andrés, the epithet of Andrés, y el de Pablo. El puto de Andrés y el de Pablo, the epithet of Andrés and the one of Pablo is totally out, strongly ungrammatical. Okay? And finally, of course, slurs can have restrictive modification and epithets cannot. Okay? So if you look at the two syntactic classes, you see difference in syntactic position, anti-logophoric effects, principle C effects, degree modification, occurrence in binomial construction, possibility of presence or absence of nominal ellipsis, presence or absence of restrictive modification, and you see that the contrast is absolute. Okay. So here is the idea. Again, this is a case for an epithet. We have an expressive. It's a word which is basically merged in a position which is non-predicative. So there is no truth condition at play, but there are use conditions at play. And you can obtain this use condition at play at LF, okay, at LF, by making use of exactly the same rule that Potts has proposed for epithets. Okay, it's a case in which idiota combines with the index, which is the pronoun. Then the rule is going to give you the index at the at-issue level, and this is going to be subject to an assignment function. And then at the below the bullet in the expressive dimension, you have the expressive modification. And this expressive modification is perfectly well behaved, is functional. Okay, idiota modify its argument. Okay. Okay, compared with, I'm claiming here, and this is not my claim, this is something that people working on expressive has been claiming, that some expressives are kind of expletives, okay? But compared with pure expletives, such as it or there, the idea is the same. They are not a special lexical item, but just pronoun whose syntactic distribution determines a vacuous interpretation. Consider, for instance, the occurrence of it in one. It seems that it's going to rain. It killed a rat. You cannot have an expletive meaning here. Or Sean ate it. It cannot have an expletive meaning, right? So, as epithets, pure expletives are also recycled items. Yet, there are two important differences. One, epithets are not forced to occur in the syntactic position. They do by selection restriction on core functional categories. So, they are not selected as expletive or pure expletives are. And two, epithets, but not expletives, are semantically active at the use conditional level. And this is because epithets, but not pure expletive, come from mixed words. So basically what I'm claiming here is that an expressive like an epithet like is originally a mixed word, which simply happens to lose its two-dimensional condition at the expletive position in which, however, it preserves the use conditional dimension. Okay?
Andres, you have 5 minutes left.
Yes, exactly. I'm confident. So another case that points at vocative, right? So if you say Andres es negro, Andres is black, this is a slur. This is not a racial slur in my Spanish. This is a social class slur. It can also not be a particular slur, but if you use negro as a vocative, like gracias negro, this is a totally non-truth conditional word. Negro doesn't mean nothing related to race or social class. It's just an affective way to address the here. There is a famous example in football or soccer, because you can recall that Cavani, a football player from Uruguay, was sanctioned in England. In England, because he wrote a Twitter saying "Gracias negro" to a friend, and then poor guy, he has to pay a bunch of money because he was called racist or whatever. But it turned out that in Spanish, this word is not in this context at least, it's not racist or discriminatory at all, right? It's a very, very famous example. But there are a lot of vocative which basically means nothing at the truth conditional level. Amigo, amiga, bicho, bichi, boludo, boludo, capo, campeón, chabón, chico, flaco, gato, gordo, hermano, jefe. All these words are predicative at the truth conditional level, but they are vacuous at the truth conditional level when used as vocatives. Okay. Again, there are important differences with epithets. First, the set of words used as vocatives are not necessarily bidimensional in the favored sense. So, flaca, for instance, in one is not a mixed word. Okay. And second, the use conditional meaning of some vocatives are acquired in vocative position and only in vocative position. So Ana's flaca is not expressive, flaca veni is expressive. Okay. So interim summary 2, epithets are expressive expletive. Syntax provides different mere positions, some of which are predicative and some of which are not. In expressive position, a mixed word, both with use and truth condition, only preserves use condition. And this is the idea. So, in conclusion, I think that there are good reasons to think of context system, which basically the use conditions, can access to both PF, lexical PF items or syntactic structures at PF, and can also access to LF. Okay, this is the idea. Argument extension, as I presented, it reflects a situation in which use condition access to PF objects is structurally modified by post-cyclic manipulation. Strictly speaking, there is no reason to claim a break in semantic compositionality, which is met at the relevant interface LF. When you have no argument extension, like epithets, the context system deduces use conditions entirely from LF. Okay, there is a typo there. So when this happens, when these conditions are entirely deduced at LF, there is no extension, argument extension effect. This is the case of epithet, but it's also the case with postnominal expressive adjective like la abogada maldita. Okay. Conclusion. So some forms of non-representational meaning result from hopefully well-defined syntactic manipulation, namely late merge and syntactic recycling. If something along these lines is on track, then we will have provide some good reasons to favor the representation first conjecture. Recall the conjecture, which is basically that language is mainly a representational system, and this is maybe because, as Post has claimed, language must be conceived as an instrument for reasoning. So affective meaning will appear to be a complication of rational language. I have implemented this idea with a concrete syntax or thesis about syntactic manipulation. Okay. Now let me finish just to make a brief comparison with another more radical approach. I mean, the idea that that expressivity is marked and require manipulation is not new. For instance, Norbert Kohlberg has proposed a very lucid, very nice implementation of the representation first conjecture. Concretely, he assumes, in a way similar to what I did here, that emotion is read by the appraisal system through information available or deduced from the PF interface, usually not from LF. Yet for Kohlberg, the grammar of emotion requires deviation of the rule of grammar in at least 3 different ways. You can get deviation of grammar because you basically use a mark word. You basically get expressivity if you really violates your rule of grammar, like in 2, or you can get expressive information by duplicating stuff. Okay, so here are some examples of each case. Let me just focus on this one, which is the very famous spurious ein in Dutch, in boeken. Here what you see is the indefinite singular ein combined with boeken, which is plural, and this is a deviation of grammar, and this produces some type of perplexity in your mind. Okay, that's the idea. This is kind of poetry. And there are other cases. Prima facie epithets in Spanish are a good candidate for Kohlberg's deviant approach because you can see lot of putative agreement concord failures in epithets. For instance, when you say the chicken as an epithet, el is masculine but gallina is feminine. When you say el bestia, the determiner is masculine but bestia is feminine. When you say el cabeza, which is an epithet also, el is masculine, but cabeza is feminine. So, and if you want to look at the type of agreement or anaphoric resolution you have, you can see that gallina, which is feminine, is not the controller of the anaphoric resolution because gallina is feminine, but lo, the pronoun here, is masculine. So this is a very good candidate. This is exactly what Kohlberg has in mind. However, I have shown, or I hope to have shown, that epithets are not the head of the extended nominal projection in which they are included. So there is no reason to think that epithets require deviation of rule of grammar. Syntactic recycling, this is external merge in non-predicative position, seems to be enough. Okay? Now, there are some cases that maybe are in the direction that Kohlberg is proposing. One is inclusive language in Spanish. As you may know, for those speakers in Spanish that speak inclusive language, they add a gender morpheme to the binary system of niño, niña, masculine, feminine. They add a third morpheme, which is the morpheme E, to indicate some neutrality with respect to binarity, with respect to gender identification, and so on. Of course, there are non-native speakers of this gender system, but the phenomenon is extended, and in particular in Buenos Aires. The reaction this way of speaking produced are exactly expressive both in terms of its social impact and in terms of perceptual reactions. Okay? There are other candidates for an approach along the lines of Corber. One is the use of the article with proper names, forgetting an expressive meaning. You say in River Plate Spanish Andrés or El Andrés, and when you say El Andrés, you get the flavor of affective closeness. And this seems a deviation of rule of grammar in the sense that you block head movement from N to D, which is the usual case with proper names, and you insert instead an article. Or, for instance, you have also the use of degree modifiers with non-gradable nouns like re libertad, re freedom, or re fiesta, re party, which are expressive constructions, which seems to violate the selection restriction for gradable or degree modifier. So thank you very much. That's all.
Thank you, Andres. Now we move on to the Q&A. If you have a question, please raise your hand. Peter.
Sure, thanks for that. I have a question about why people that work on expressivism don't want to go all the way. So, for example, we have Potts who wants to think that there's a, there's the representational part of the grammar, and then, here and there we can slot in the expressivist stuff. But if you think about what Kaplan was doing in his Oops and Ouch paper, it's sort of like he's saying, well, I'm going to take all the expressivist stuff and I'm going to give a truth conditional account of what's going on. Could we do the exact opposite? By which I mean, could we take the representational stuff and give an account that's expressivist from top to bottom? Now, in philosophy, in particular in ethics, there have been people that have proposed what they called expressivist semantics for ethical claims. And you can give an expressivist semantics in the sense that you eliminate the truth predicate when you give the semantics and you give an expressivist predicate instead. So instead of true and false, you have yay and boo or something like that. And so then the thought is, why doesn't an expressivist, a real expressivist that really wants to go all the way with this, why doesn't the expressivist just say, all right, it's like, forget the representational part. There is no representational part. We're going to go expressivist from top to bottom. And then when you're talking about what's going on in different positions in trees, you're talking about different kinds of expressive content as opposed to this part's of expressive, this part's representational, etc. Thanks a lot.
Sorry, I didn't get the question exactly, because what I mean, are you asking why not to take an expressivist route here? I mean, and for the typical expressivist analysis for ethical terms? I didn't get the question.
Forget the application to ethical terms. The question is, just think about the true and false business, right? And the idea is that instead of building your semantics with true and false as the basic primitive building blocks, which is how you build a representational semantics, you use expressive predicates as your primitives. So like yay or an attitude of approval. So it's just like attitudes all the way up and down. So in that sense, semantics is not representational at all. It's all expressivist, right?
Okay,
That's the idea. And so then you don't have this weirdness, like what part is representational? How does the representational, how do you knit them together?
I think that the answer to this is basically what I said about markedness. What I say about Martinez is that basically, first, Martinez right, and then the basic syntactic, the basic grammar is basically the grammar of knowledge or something along that lines. And then whenever you want to get extra flavors, you have to manipulate syntax, okay? And this manipulation has it has some marked properties, like argument extension, for instance. It's not well behaved in semantic terms. So that's the idea. I'm not claiming that all type of expressive are that way. Of course, you have qualitative adjectives, right? Which are expressive in a sense, in the sense that they need a should or something like that. And in that case, you can say they are unidimensional. They have basically, let's say, a normal syntax, and then you deduce subjectivity or expressivity in normal ways. But I think that for many facts, even slurs, you need some type of lexical manipulation, right? And even more, there are also some condition on pragmatic competition. You need some type of alternative account. I have said nothing about this, but it's not only the case that you manipulate syntax. You manipulate syntax to create alternatives. So that is part of what I think is more complex syntax and more complex pragmatic picture. That would be the reason. But I'm not saying that this is, I'm not saying that this is an explanation for all type of expressivity, because I think that expressivity is really a kind of epiphenomenic phenomenon. But yeah, I agree with the first representation conjecture, which basically says that grammar is first a grammar of representation. But okay, there are other cases, because there is a question about how to get expressivity by other means. And one way is the classical way in which we explore position, as you said, in the sense that you have left periphery, you have low position in the clause. Many of the fact that Martina has discussed in her work is related to the fact that in the CP area you have a lot of expressive activity. And this is, I think that this is normal syntax in a sense, right? The type of syntax I'm discussing is one in which you see some type of deviation. But I don't know if I answer or I convince you about the story. Thank you.
No, thank you for that.
Brenda, we can't hear you, Brenda.
So I was saying, thank you very much, Andres, for a very thought-provoking presentation. I have a very specific question concerning the grammar of Spanish and the problem of pronominal adjectives. And I wanted to ask if you would consider extending your solution of the idea of late merge or recycling for adjectives, qualifying adjectives in pronominal position, which are not in themselves expressive, which are not in themselves slurs or anything. I'm thinking of examples that in English could be rendered at the poor man got himself killed, or in a traffic accident, or I got a sad, I guess you can say it, I got a sad $200 for the job. And in Spanish, in these cases, poor and sad would be necessarily pronominal. And I think you have a sort of phenomenon of argument extension here also, if I understood the process correctly.
Well, yeah, thanks for the question. There is a big fact about the Spanish, which is fascinating, as you know, which is the fact that pronominal position in Spanish is not intersective. Whatever you put in the pronominal position is going to destroy your intersections. This is very fascinating. You have intentional adjective, you have the ones you mentioned, like pobre. You have also other ones that trigger specific readings, like el famoso músico or un famoso músico. But first, they don't trigger argument extension. When you say el pobre hombre, blah, 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 pobre always affects hombre. That's the thing here. Now, there are other facts, which is basically that, or take the case of, you have also a positive readings in pronominal position, like, Andres Bello case, las mansas ovejas or las blancas ovejas.
Yes, but yes, okay.
In which this is a non-restrictive reading of the type of the sheep, which happen to be white. But they, again, they don't have this flavor of argument extension exactly. And second, all the expressive adjectives are above these ones. So you can say, las malditas pobres ovejas, tu maldita, ese maldito pobre hombre. So it's in the position is different. They are higher. The expressive ones are extremely high. You cannot say ese pobre maldito hombre. That's strange. You have to say ese maldito pobre hombre.
Okay, you're right.
So I think that no, I think that this is a case in which you have something like what they can be called a small syntax, in which you form a concept by just merging pobre with hombre in the head position, and you get kind of concept. Of course, the concept of pobre hombre is kind of expressive, right? But I think that this unidimensional in a sense. So I try to follow your suggestion, but I think that they are not exactly the same type of animal.
May I have just a short follow-up? What do you make of something like 200 tristes pesos, something like a sad 200 pesos?
Yeah,
It's not the pesos which are sad.
Yes.
So there is some sort of argument extension.
Yeah. There are many types of syntactic semantic mismatches. What happened with argument extension, this is something that people have argued is a special type of mismatch in which indeed it seems that you have just the expression of an emotion, right? And the expression of an emotion can target the sister in the syntax, but can target the preposition or can target. But of course, we have other type of syntactic semantic mismatches, which requires semantic type changing or this type of operations. So there is a question. This is an open question. It's an open question whether argument extension can be reduced to the usual type of semantic failures we find in other domains, like the one you mentioned. Okay. Yes. So. Yeah.
Martina.
Thank you so much. That was really interesting. I have one comment. There is a paper, I think it's a small proceedings paper by Marta Ruda. I don't know whether you're aware of it, but she has a similar model where she says that the LF and PF both feed into what she calls the affective system. So it's a little bit similar, and she says it's the periphery of the grammar, not the core of the grammar. So I can send you the reference. And the other thing, you mentioned the pre versus post nominal adjectives. In English, we also have pre and post nominal adjectives, and so like the Cinque has a paper about that, which lays out all the restrictions. So like every possible candidates versus every candidate possible, where the post-nominal one is not ambiguous between the two readings that are available in the pre-nominal position. So I wonder, given your story, whether that would account for the fact that in English, even though you have this post-nominal position available, you couldn't do that dog damn. You can't have that. It's completely bad. So I wonder whether that you might, it might fall out from your analysis. So it's just a suggestion.
Well, I think that it doesn't follow, right? I mean,
well, I think because the way Cinque discusses is the situation in, say, in Italian is opposed to like the reverse of the situation in English, where in Italian the post-nominal position is ambiguous and the pre-nominal one is unambiguous, but in English it is the other way around. So there's something about the interpretation that's available to the two positions that is mirror image, and that might give you a way to account for the fact that you can't have the dog damn, even though the position in principle is available, but the interpretation that you want might not be.
I see. Thank you. Yes, I see. Yeah. But my point with the case of English is that because people are very perplexed about because even bots has two proposals for fucking. he says in the book, no, this is functional application. And then he suggests in another way, no, maybe it's not. Maybe it's just isolated or something like that. So maybe, and for very similar type examples type. And my thought was, well, maybe the problem in English is that you are not seeing the different attachment positions because the usual pronominal position. But I didn't pay attention to this to this type of nominal adjective. So I have to look.
Yeah, I'll send you the references for both the Ruda paper and the Cinque paper.
Please, yes, I didn't know about Marta's position. Yes, thank you.
Okay.
John.
Hi. I may have misunderstood something, so forgive me if I have. I wasn't quite understanding the motivation for the appeal to late merge in the cases of the modifiers. I mean, I was just thinking whether, is the idea that the implicature is counter-cyclical, so you need something like late merge? Is that what it was?
The idea was because the original, as I said, because at some point, if you are familiar with Potts logic, it has this axiom which basically introduces isolated conventional implicature in binary trees, in branching trees, right? So, and surprisingly, the construction he analyzed under the isolated axiom is always related to non-restrictive modifications, some supplements, and parentheticals, and stuff for which some people have claimed that you need an extra cycle of attachment, a further cycle of attachment. So I have only this type of conceptual motivation, which is basically trying to motivate isolated conventional implicature, the conventional implicature rule by connecting proposals regarding late merge to isolated CI. There is not a clear empirical argument for this. Just there is not a motivation that says, "Oh, yeah, this has to be post-cyclic." I mean, there are a lot of worries about what type of post-cyclic operations you can do in the syntax. But then, if you look at other prenominal stuff, if you look at this is the only one that has this very crazy behavior, right? Then, when you look at honorifics, you see that the same happened with some type of honorific which shows argument extension and has exactly the same properties that fucking of done. But let me add a point, which I think is the only empirical motivation I have. For what I have found, maldito in Spanish is non-sensitive to semantic types. So, for instance, when you say maldito can combine with common nouns, like maldito abogado, the fucking lawyer, but also with proper nouns. You can say maldita Ana. So for me, this doesn't happen with epithets, which always take a semantic argument like type E. Okay, so this non-sensitivity to semantic type is for me an indication that this attachment only looks or only see syntactic category, and this happens in a cycle of syntactic computation in which semantic type doesn't matter. But I didn't add this motivation in the slide because I'm not sure what happened with postnominal expressive adjective. I'm not sure that you cannot say Ana maldita.
So does Potts appeal to the concept of late merge?
Potts what? Sorry?
Does Potts actually use the concept of late merge or just an extra cycle? Because I mean, it's just I'm familiar with late merge from one criterion for distinguishing it is say between how you get different principal C effects, right, from a bar movement and A movement, but that kind of diagnostic wouldn't apply to these modifiers. So that's kind of what I was.
Yes, but I don't remember. Potts didn't mention late merge, right? No, I don't think so. And then with respect to the relative clause stuff and the story about principle C, well, yeah, it has been proposed a late merge approach, but this is different to, I mean, it's different to what I'm saying here.
Yeah.
Basically, principles, I mean, there are binding conditions applying there. So there are, these guys are, in a sense, LF interpreted, right? So it's a different type of.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Perfect. Let me thank both Brenda and Andres again for the talks they gave in this part of the session. It is time for the break. We will be back in 50 minutes.
Bye-bye. Thank you.